So the other night, Jesse and I were watching this documentary on the James Webb Telescope, and it was kind of describing how this whole thing unfolded. I'm going to kind of go through that a little bit. This episode isn't about a fucking telescope. It's about belief, and I think it ties in pretty well with the conversation that we just played on the last episode where Cub and I talked about mindset. So while I was watching this, I was super fascinated, but after we turned it off, I had this crazy mindset shift, and it just stayed with me. So I decided it might be cool to talk about here because it might help some of you get a mindset shift like what I had in terms of maybe limited beliefs or limiting beliefs or just anything in relation to that. So I'm going to get into it. So basically, if you're not familiar, I'm sure everybody's pretty familiar with this thing, but maybe not. I wasn't as familiar as I was until I watched this documentary. But overall, and I might have some of these details wrong, but they built this fucking telescope and they shot the fucking thing into space on a rocket and then sent that thing out 1,000,000 miles away from Earth. They used like the sun's orbit and all kinds of crazy shit, all this stuff that I can't even understand. But they were showing all the process of how they put the thing together. And when I'm watching it, I'm like, how the fuck is this going to work? Because like all these little fragile, delicate parts are required, and the thing's kind of folded up to get it into space and get it 1,000,000 miles away. And then when it gets there, it kind of constructs itself, or I don't know if the terminology is right, but like all these things need to happen, and it all happens remotely. So there's nobody, obviously there's nobody 1,000,000 miles away that's out there, assembling this thing. So they had to build it in a way to where this thing opens up and does all the shit that it needs to do. And they were talking about how many single points of failure they were on this thing. And it was like 300 and something, I think. So any one of those things could have gone wrong and the whole mission would be fucked. I don't know how it works. Maybe they had to start all over and make a whole new one, whatever it is. But it's like decades of time. Some like 20,000 people worked on this thing. I think it was like $10 billion or some shit. It was just crazy, huge, impossible numbers. And then a huge impossible task that they're trying to do to send this fucking thing out to take pictures of galaxies and shit in space that we've never seen before. And so they launch the thing and it works. They open it up and it all works. And I'm just like, how the fuck did that work? Because like I said, there was like 300 and something single points of failure. And I think it was like 200 and something of those were just in this thing called like the sunshade or sun shield or something. When they were testing it, I mean, this thing looked like tinfoil. It was like, how the hell is that going to survive? It's out there in space and they got to open this huge thing up and it kind of blocks the sun. And they said like, if anything went wrong with that, the whole thing would be fucked. And since it's so far away, they can't send people out to fix it. So anyway, it just seemed like an impossible task. And so when they finished it and it worked and they're sending pictures back, I didn't even finish it. This was as far as we got. But we ended up going to sleep and I told Jesse and I was like, man, that shit really opened up my eyes, because to see this like crazy impossible task happen, and they described everything that could go wrong, and they described all the challenges, and they described all this shit. I was like, all of a sudden my personal goals and the shit that I want to accomplish in my life just all of a sudden seems so much easier, like I want to build my successful business. I'm working really hard to build Machine into this cool, like iconic thing that serves the community and do all this kind of stuff. I don't need to get into detail, but a lot of big goals are around that, but they're nowhere near anything like that shit. Like nowhere near, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, fuck yeah, I can do this shit. Like I want to get in better shape. I'm about to be 50, and I want to enter 50 with a much better health and much better physical fitness and all that kind of shit. And it just seems so hard when you're trying to do that kind of stuff. But then when I'm watching this, I'm like, yeah, I got to lose a couple pounds and put on a little muscle. Like it's like nothing compared to this crazy fucking thing that I just watched happen. It's like, it really shifted my perspective quite a bit, you know? So I kind of bullet pointed some shit out. I'm kind of wing it a little bit, but I'm sort of hoping that maybe I can pass on some of this mindset shift over to you, because I don't know, a lot of my stress got alleviated when I started thinking about it on this level. I was just like, man, the shit people can do, you know? And then you compare it to your own goals and it's like, man, if they can do that, then I can do this. And I think it's important. I mean, I don't know if it's important to compare those things, but I found it really helpful to kind of help with the limiting beliefs. And that kind of falls into place with the growth mindset that Cub and I were talking about on the sort of throwback episode. So while I was thinking about that, I thought, you know, at one point it was probably impossible. Well, of course it was impossible. Like nobody thought we'd ever fly. And the Wright brothers, I think there was some other controversy around that. I can't remember, like somebody else flew first, or I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But at one point that shit was impossible. And then all of a sudden somebody did it. And then all of a sudden all the limiting beliefs of around that were just shattered. It was like, oh shit, that isn't impossible. And another one that I want to talk about a little further is the 4-minute mile. And I don't know if you guys ever heard about this. I don't know what year it was. 1954, I think. So I don't know. It was a long time ago. Up until then, everybody thought that it was physically impossible for a human being to run a mile in under 4 minutes. I think, I don't know all the details, but it was like, they just thought like your body would break down or some shit. It was an impossible thing. And then all of a sudden, this dude, Roger Bannister, fucking breaks the 4-minute mile. He breaks it by like a millisecond or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was like just barely under the 4-minute mile. And then all of a sudden, all of these beliefs around a human being being able to run a 4-minute mile were shattered. So it was no longer impossible. So if you think about it, in all the years of running up until, I think it's 1954, everybody ran over 4-minute miles because it was just impossible. It was totally impossible. But then as soon as this dude shatters that belief, a month later, somebody else broke it. That just tells you how powerful limiting beliefs are. So if you have all these experts out there saying like it's impossible to do, you know, your physical body can't handle that kind of whatever they were saying. I don't know all of it, but it was a strong belief among anybody that did that it was not going to be possible to run a 4-minute mile. So nobody did it. And then all of a sudden one dude does it. And then a month later, another dude breaks that guy's record. And then if I remember right, more people have broke it since then. And I don't know what all the details are, but it's not uncommon now. I mean, it's probably still hard as fuck to do. I mean, I ran a 7-minute mile once and I was about to die, or 7 minute and something. I don't remember. I don't fucking like running, you know, but I was in pretty good shape at the time and I gave it a shot, you know, but 4 minutes. Oh my God. I just can't even imagine what kind of shape you'd have to be in. I wish I should have researched this a little more to see just how many people have broke that at this point. But anyway, the whole point is like, that was the belief. And then as soon as somebody shattered it, everybody's mindset shifted to, oh shit, that's possible. Now I'm going to do it. And they did. And they called it I think there's a term that was phrased, the Bannister effect. So it's like, once we see something as possible, we believe we can achieve it too. So I feel like that's related to what I'm talking about in a sense. Like while I was watching these people send this satellite up into space, that doesn't mean like it's possible for me to do that. But then I compared it to my own goals and my own beliefs. And I was like, fuck, man, if these people can make this shit happen, I can certainly make this shit happen. I get like my goals just seem so much easier after that. And so I started thinking about what other things have I had limited stuff about. And I remember, you know, for a long time, actually the entire time I've done graffiti, I've been held back by limiting beliefs on what it was I could do. I wrote for a couple of years before I started hanging around with like really high level writers. But, you know, I was looking at the magazines and shit, like Can Control and stuff like that. And I was seeing work that just looked impossible for me to do. So the Bannister effect didn't exactly happen. It was like, I saw that it was possible for somebody, but I had that limiting belief. It's not possible for me to do. And so I've always had that. And I still have it, but I have, in some cases, I have surpassed the stuff that I didn't think that I would be able to do. So like when I first started seeing people do like bevels on their letters, I wanted to try that for a long time and I just didn't do it. And then it became sort of trendy and like, so then I didn't want to do it because of that. But then eventually I was like, fuck that. I want to do it. I want to try it. And so I struggled through it for quite a while, drawing it, trying to understand. There's that part where, I don't know if you guys have ever tried this, but where the fucking bee curls under, that my brain still gets kind of tied in a knot. I'm like, what's the bottom? What's the top? It's like kind of a fucked up thing. But anyway, over time, it's taken a while, but over time I was able to surpass what my previous beliefs were in terms of what I thought I was capable of doing. But at the same time, I still see stuff that I was like, man, I wish I could do stuff like that. And my limiting beliefs, I believe, are holding me back. Like obviously like my skill level and my talent and all that kind of stuff. But if you think about it on a growth mindset perspective, it's better to not think about it on the level of like, I can't do that. It's more productive to be like, I can't do that now, but if I really want to achieve that, I can start working really hard and I can get somewhere. I may not get all the way to that point, but I can certainly get way further along than I can now, where I can get much further along than where I am now. And I have experienced that, but it's interesting. Like it still hasn't. Sorry, my dog's barking in the back. I don't know if it's getting picked up, but I'm just gonna leave it in there. I want to keep going. So anyway, I still have that limiting belief, and I have that on a lot of things. Like I still have that to a certain degree on my business and on my physical fitness. Those are kind of my two big goals right now, is like getting my business to a place that I want to get it to. And I'm very confident in my ability, but at the same time, like what I'm trying to do is pretty far ahead of anything that I've ever done. And well, obviously, I mean, that's what a goal is. I mean, but when I sit down and I visualize it, like I had a visualization session the other day and I was just clearly like walking through the space and I was talking to people and doing all this kind of stuff and trying to really exist in that place, that's facility that I want to have for a machine. And, it feels very real. But at the same time, it's very intimidating to try to figure out how to do that. Like our revenue has to be like 20 times what it is now. Staff has to be much bigger. All these new systems are going to have to come into play. So as my mind starts going down that path of like, how am I going to get there? It's overwhelming. And a lot of my mentors and a lot of people that I follow, they say that's like not the best way to go. You need to visualize what you want and not so much worry about how you're going to get there. But at the same time, you kind of have to work backwards and try to figure out, what do I need to do now that's going to help me get towards that? And so that's where things like the power list and kind of winning every day and all that kind of shit. But I'm getting a little off track, but that's where the growth mindset comes in. I mean, it's a lot of things can happen if you believe they can. So you may not know exactly how you're going to get there, but if you take steps every day that you feel are the ones you need to take in order to get there, you're going to start figuring out things along the way. So if you were to look at, say, Machine in 2015, I think I talked about this before. This was even later. It was probably like 2016, 2017 or something when I kind of ran the numbers of what it would take for Machine. And at this point, Machine was losing money. I was funding it with my other business. We wrote down on a whiteboard kind of what we needed every month in order to just have Machine pay for itself. And the girl that was working with me and I just kind of looked at each other and we were like, how the fuck are we going to do that? It felt impossible. And so at that time I was like, I don't know how the fuck we're going to do that. And I didn't believe it was possible. I didn't believe that number was possible. But then you fast forward to where we're at now, that number we do in less than 3 days. So the number that I thought was impossible to get per month, we're doing it in maybe not less than 3 days, about 3 days. I don't know, give or take. 3-4 days, some shit like that. Whatever it is, it's way it's a big jump from where we were. Impossible to do in fucking 1 month. Now 3-4 days. That's the number we're hitting. That was part of me having a fixed mindset. As soon as 2019 was a turning point for the company. It's when I think it's 2019 was when I started reading and I started doing personal development and shit like that. So a little bit of belief started coming. And then I think 2020, I read the Mindset book. I remember I read it on the plane on the way to see Jessie when she was living in Chicago. Like, I just remember that book really hit me. I've only read it one time, and it's something that sticks with me. I probably should read it again, but I don't know that I need to. but adopting the growth mindset, I think is one of the biggest reasons why I'm where I'm at now. And it's one of the biggest reasons why I'm going to get to wherever it is that I'm going to get to. If I'm shooting for this huge thing, if I don't get to that huge thing, I'm obviously going to be way further along than I am now, because I believe in that huge thing. I believe we're going to get there. But at the same time, I'm human. Shit happens. Sometimes my beliefs get knocked around a little bit. And so that's where the growth mindset comes in. You just have to believe that you can do it. So I don't know. For business owners, that's a lot. I mean, maybe you guys have experienced that. For graffiti writers, what are some things that you think is impossible for you to do? What are some of the things that you look at other people doing and you think you're never going to be able to do it? Why don't you just go after that shit? There's a quote. I think I heard it from Andy Frisella first. It's, and I did an episode similar to this, is belief follows action. The more action you take towards whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, eventually you're going to start seeing some kind of wins. You're going to start seeing some kind of progress. So if it's graffiti and you think it's impossible for me to get to that point, I'm not born with that kind of talent, whatever kind of bullshit you're telling yourself. If you make the decision, look, I'm going to try to shatter that belief. One way to shatter that is just be like, I'm going to start practicing and learn how to do that shit. You may not believe it at first, but if you stay consistent every single day, you take a few steps towards that thing, whatever it is sketching or going out and painting, if it's a technique, whatever it is. If you're taking steps every day or very consistently, whatever that looks like for you, eventually you're going to start seeing some kind of progress. Once you start seeing some kind of progress, then you're going to start believing it a little bit more. And the more progress you get, the more belief you get. The further along you get, the more you're like, wait a second, I think I might actually be able to do this shit. So I would say if you want to apply something like this to something in your life that you're feeling some kind of limited beliefs about, you could look at historical things that people thought were impossible, but then they ended up doing it. You could Google search that or fucking type it in ChatGPT or whatever. That information's out there. Maybe seeing some things that were impossible before and now they're all of a sudden possible. That might help you get that perspective shift. Maybe everything that I just said might have helped you already get that perspective shift. So in addition to that, another thing that I think is very important is embracing the idea that failure is part of the process. And it's kind of cliche to say. You've probably seen memes. I don't know. Maybe you don't have the same kind of algorithm shit being shown to you as I do, but it's a pretty common thing to hear. But it's true. Every failure is a lesson. It's not a failure if you keep going. It's like if you're watching a sports game, until the game is over, nobody has lost yet. You know what I mean? Like you could say, yeah, who's winning? So-and-so's winning. This other team's obviously losing, but they haven't lost yet because you're still in the game. Same thing with failure. You fail and then you keep moving forward. You're still in the game. You haven't lost yet. So I try to keep that top of mind because in life, in business, in graph, and all kinds of things, you're going to run into those kind of failures all the time. And if you're getting discouraged by them, then you're not actually using them for the powerful thing that they are. Like the thing about failure is it's like, not only is it part of the process, it's necessary to move on to the next phase of whatever it is that you're doing. So imagine if you're doing something and you never fail. Every drawing you ever do is perfect. Everything works out just fine. Wouldn't that mean that you're not pushing yourself hard enough? Wouldn't that mean that the reason you're not failing is because you're staying in techniques or in kind of shit that you're comfortable with. So unless you're failing, you may not really be moving forward at the pace that you could. If you keep pushing yourself to where you're failing consistently and then recovering and learning something from the failure. I mean, I don't know if you should fail like all the time. I don't know. I don't know if there's a ratio to this shit, but if you're not failing, you might not be pushing it hard enough. And then other than that, like cultivate this relentless pursuit for learning and growing. You know, fixed mindset is all cool and all that shit to say, but if you're not like taking practical steps towards it by learning, practicing, and doing all that shit, it's kind of just, it is what it is. I mean, that's my opinion. So if you want to share any of these impossible goals that you have with me, I'd be happy to hear them and I'd be happy to talk to you about them. You can email me at bus@machinestudio.com, or you can, actually probably the easiest way outside of email would be to get me on Twitter. Literally nobody DMs me on Twitter, so the DMs are like nice and clean. Bus166MSK on Twitter. I got barely any followers on there. I do like that platform. So if you fuck with Twitter, follow me on Twitter. All right. I'll see you guys next week. All right. Good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.